Okay, here we are again. Welcome. Good morning, everybody. We're here in on Bava Kama, Mem Gimel Amid Beis, and let's go with Ella Reva Ufe Iboya Leboyale. Where is this in the Gemora?
In the middle of the page.
Not the middle of the page. Okay.
That's where the line is.
Yeah, it's
Babor.
Matmish in the middle of the page. The first word of the line is Babor. Babor lo katan. More answer Dilma Tana B'Shayer, which is very interesting. By the way, I was looking this up last night. This Tana B'Shayer. Without going into it too much, but if you'll take a look on the Gemora in Yud Aleph, you'll see the Brisa brought, I believe, in its entirety. And the Brisa has many different sections, only one of which is the assertion that Eish is more chomer than Bor. It says like 5 other different things. Shor is more chomer than Bor, and Bor is more chomer than this, and this is more chomer than... Each one of them has a certain stringency over another one. So the Gemora here mentioned this part of Eish is more chomer than Bor, and it just brought one proof of that. And the Gemora said that this didn't bring the other part, that Mashiach came this Ilu ha'esh mishalemes shelo b'kavana damim. This that Eish pays when it's shelo b'kavana, it'll pay damim, which is not so of Bor. Lo Katani, we didn't learn that case as being one of the instances of Eish being more chomer than Bor. So we proved that was Tana holds that it's not so. And that we said, no, Dilma Tana B'Shar. Maybe the Tana of that Brisa simply listed one of the instances where we find that Eish is more chomer than Bor, and he left out other cases where we also find that Eish is more chomer than Bor. Because that's the way the Tana speaks. The Tana doesn't always list all the cases. Sometimes he lists just a couple, and here he lists even only one. Okay, so therefore we don't have any proof really for Rava that the case of Eish will pay damim. Shelo b'kavana. We have no source in any Tanaic source that says that Eish will pay damim. So therefore, how do we explain what Rava said to Rabbah? Or said, Ella Rava Gufa Iboya Meboyale. He was simply asking him a question. What do you, Rabbah, hold? In the case of Eish, Shelo b'kavana, what's the din? Mi mishalim damim or lo? Is there a payment of damim or not? Is there a payment of damim or not? Okay, so now from there we're going to go on. What are the two sides of the coin here? Does it pay or does it not pay? Rachman, you want to read?
Ella Rabba Gufe. Why Abaye is asking a question late to Rabba. To show Shelo b'kavana, mi mishalem damim or no? So the fire that it was without kavanah, if it pays damim, without kavanah, if it pays damim, or it doesn't pay damim. Okay. Aminan kabei shur. Haim, how do you say it in English? Haim. Starting a question, Haim.
Is it so?
Is it so? Aminan kabei shur hu. Kabei shur hu the kavanah mishalem. And kabei shur hu the kavanah with kavanah mishalem kofir. Shlo b'kavanah mishlem damim. With a shore with kavanah, intent to kill. Mishlem kofir, he pays kofir. Shlo b'kavanah, without kavanah, he's paying damages, damim. Aval isho with the lighting a fire, the kavanah, with kavanah. Lo mishalem kofir. There's no kofir for lighting somebody up. It's only connected to a shore, I guess. Shore what?
Lo mishalem kofir.
There's no kofir with setting somebody on fire.
Why?
Because that's only a din with the shore moed. More.
Because the person that did so is chayv misa.
It's chayv mita, right? It's chayv mita, okay. Aval isho is b'kavanah lo mishlem kofir, it's chayv mita. Shlo b'kavanah, without kavanah, nami lo mishlem damim.
Also won't pay damim. So, what are we saying over here? That do we? This is the first side of the coin. This is one side of the coin. This is the side of the coin that says that Eish will not pay damim. And how do we know that Eish won't pay damim? We're comparing it to the din of shore. What do we see by shore? Kavi shore, who the b'kavanah mishalem kofir. When the shore kills b'kavanah, there will be a payment of kofir. Oh, so therefore, in the case when it's shelo b'kavanah, and there won't be a payment of kofir, mishalem damim. You will pay damim in place of the kofir that he wasn't chayav, since he did it shelo b'kavanah. Aval ishoy, when his eish, even when he does it b'kavanah, lo mishalem kofir, there's no payment of kofir. So if there's no payment of kofir for eish b'kavanah, lo b'kavanah, in the case where he doesn't do it b'kavanah, nami, the din will be lo mishalem damim. He also won't pay damim. He doesn't pay kofir b'kavanah. He doesn't pay damim shelo b'kavanah. That's the contrast. That's how we will look at it, because we're contrasting the din of eish with the din of shore. There's a payment of kofir with kavanah, so then there's going to be payment of damim without kavanah. But eish, there's no payment of kofir with kavanah, so there's no payment of damim without kavanah either. Okay.
The other side of the coin?
Now, the other side of the coin says...
That was tougher. The second part is more difficult.
Okay,
Understand.
Let's see the next part, Bezrat Hashem.
Or Dilma, or perhaps, came out because the Gabei Shoro, Shelo b'kavanah, Afagav the lake of kofir.
Even though there's no kofir.
Kofir mishalem damim.
Nevertheless, pay damim.
Again. Or Dilma, perhaps, came out because the Gabei Shoro, Shelo b'kavanah, without kavanah, it's not talking about kavanah here. That's what's difficult to understand. Understand? It's talking about without covenant. It's starting out without covenant.
Right.
If we have the case where the ox killed unintentionally and he pays damages, that's a good thing.
Okay.
I forgot the leke kofar, even though there's no kofar in that case. It's not a case of kofar at all. Right? Shalo b'kavanah. I forgot the leke kofar, even though there's no payment of kofar in that case.
Right.
Nevertheless, v'shalom damim. There could be a payment of damim. There is a payment of damim. So that's one look. That's one. In other words, why? According to this second side, we're saying, why is there a payment of damim? Not because necessarily that there's a payment of kofar in the case of bikavanah,
Right.
but we're saying that, look, we're just looking at the case of shelo b'kavanah, and we're saying, we see that there's no payment of kofar, and even though there's no payment of kofar, but there'll be a payment of damim. There will be a payment of damim. So you see what? That even though there's no payment of kofar, there could be a payment of damim, like they're not related so much. So now we're going to go to Eish, and we're going to say, oh, also by Eish. The same thing should work out. Gabi Eish. This is, in other words, this Odilma is drawing a similarity between a shore and Eish. The first side of the coin was, we see that shores just, it's different. The dinim are different because they start with the fact that the dinim of kofar are different.
Right.
By shore, there's a payment of kofar b'kavanah. Oh, so therefore it follows, as a matter of course, that there will be payment for damim when it's a case of shelo b'kavanah. Oh, but if that's so then Eish, which doesn't have a payment of kofar at all, even in the case of b'kavanah,
That's easier to understand.
therefore it also won't have a payment of damim because it's not like shore. It's not like shore. Why does shore have a payment of damim shelo b'kavanah? Because it has a payment of kofar b'kavanah.
Okay.
Sure, that has a payment of kofar b'kavanah. So a shelo b'kavanah, it'll have a payment of damim. Oh, if so, then an Eish, which doesn't have a payment of kofar,
Right.
in a case of b'kavanah, so we'll say, and therefore it's not similar to shore at all. Oh, so in the case of shelo b'kavanah, it also won't be similar to shore. It won't have a payment of damim. It won't have a payment of damim.
Okay, that's
Odilma, or now, if we look at it in a different way, we're looking in a different way now. We're looking in how the cases of shore and Eish compared to one another, exclusively seen from the case of shelo b'kavanah, and we're saying, look at the case of shore, even though it's a case of shelo b'kavanah. And therefore, there's not going to be a payment of damim, even though there's no payment of damim. Even though there's no payment of kofar, even though there's no payment of kofar in the case of shelo b'kavanah. Oh, but that doesn't stop us from saying there's a payment of damim in the case of shore. So even though, so we see something by shore that in the case of shelo b'kavanah, we're saying, oh, even though afopi, right? Even though there's no payment of kofar, there will be a payment of damim. Oh, that's the way you look at the situation when it comes to shore. We could look at the situation exactly in that same way with Eish, and now we can now understand a comparison between shore and Eish. We could say Eish also. Gabi Eish. Let's read what it says by Eish. Gabi Eish Nami. Also by Eish, the same thing is true.
I understand. Dilma kivan to the shore b'kavanah, but the liquor, it's obvious. What is he trying to tell me here? That Vadai doesn't get coffee. He's below kavanah.
I know, but it's the after, because even though he's still not paying in the case of shore, even though he's not paying, he doesn't pay kofar, right?
It's below kavanah.
He has to pay damim. He has to pay damim.
Okay.
Right? That's
yeah,
the dummy.
That's the dummy.
So now we're up to the second part, which is now for the Aish, it's going to have the same rule. Aish is not going to have kofar, so you still have to pay dummy.
Aish is just like shore, if you look at it just in the case of lo b'kavanah. What's the case of lo b'kavanah by shore? That even though there's no payment of kofar, in that case of shelo b'kavanah,
Yes.
there nevertheless is a payment of
Dummy.
damim. Ooh, well that is going to fit like a glove for the case of Aish too. Gabe Aish nami.
This is no kofir.
Also true by Aish.
There's no kofir.
Afu gav de b'kavanah. Lo mishalim kofir. Yeah, it is tricky. Even though that in the case of kavanah, you won't have a payment of kofir. Shelo b'kavanah miha mishalim kofir. But when we go to the case of shelo b'kavanah, however, miha mishalim damim, he will pay damim. Yeah, I hear what you're bothered by. Before reading the Gemora, I would have thought that the Gemora would have said, even though there's no payment of kofir in the case of shelo b'kavanah of Aish,
Yeah, all right. Right.
then therefore, nevertheless, even though that's so, nevertheless, there will be a payment of damim, just like you just got through telling me in the case of shore.
It doesn't say that.
It doesn't say that. It doesn't say what we wanted it to say. It does not say what we wanted it to say. So what should we do about that? Okay, so this is
I'm lost.
okay. You got the first part.
Yeah, the first part is
The
easy.
first part is
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
The first part makes a lot of sense.
Right.
The first part is saying there's a kesher, there's a connection between the din of b'kavanah and shelo b'kavanah in terms of the din of kofir and the din of damim.
Right.
Kofir is the din of
Sure.
b'kavanah,
Coming up.
and damim is the din of shelo b'kavanah. So we see that in the case of shore, so the case of kavanah, we've got kofir. Oh, so then we'll say, right, also in the case of shelo b'kavanah, we'll have damim. Oh, if so then if you don't have, in the case of Aish,
You don't have kofir.
where you don't have kofir in the
Kofir.
case of kavanah,
Then you won't pay them.
so then you won't pay damim, because
It's
we see from
just
shore that in
yeah.
order to be chayiv in damim, it seems like you have to have a chiyuv of kofir in the case of kavanah.
Right.
Good,
That's
that
straightforward.
seems to fit.
Yeah.
But in this case, we're saying, what are we saying?
So for shore b'kol kavana. I forgot the leg of kofir. Even if there isn't kofir, even though even that's so, it's mishlam damim. We won't pay damim.
We say, on the other hand, we say, O Dilma, Kaven de Lagabi Shor, Shalo b'kavanah, Afu Gav, Leket Kofir, B'Shalom Domim.
Okay.
So in the case of shore, we say that we see by shore that regarding the case of Shalo b'kavanah, even though there's no payment of kofir over there,
Right.
you will have a payment of damim.
Okay.
So you see, in other words, that even in the case of shore,
Right.
there is a instance where there is a divorce, so to speak, between damim and kofir. They do not go together. They don't go together. Where do they not go together? In the case of shalo b'kavanah. What's the din over there? Even though you don't pay kofir over there, but you will pay damim.
Why should
So you see that the two dinim don't go together, so to speak. Oh, can we Can we think of a situation like that? If we can say that, so now we can do the same thing in the case of Eish. We could say, even though there's an instance where there's no payment of kofar, but that won't stop us from having a payment of damim. Where do we see that? We see that in the case of kavanah. There's no payment of kofar. Shelo b'kavanah, however, there will be a payment of damim. Yes, this definitely needs Rashi. This needs Rashi. What is the Gemora doing over here? Rashi. We have a Rashi.
I don't understand this. It's the first part of the second. Or Dilma, it's mixing me up here. Or Dilma came on the Gabei Shoro. Shlo b'kavanah afagav the leka kofir. Well, if it was b'kavanah, he would get kofir. What does it mean by the low kavanah? I know that already. Wow. What's he trying to mechadesh here? Come on, the Gabei Shoro. Shlo b'kavanah afagav the leka kofir. All right, there's no kofir below kavanah. I know that. What is it? What's the connection?
That even though there's no kofir payment over there,
right,
it doesn't stop us from having a damim payment. You see that they're not connected. The first part of the first side of the coin was saying there's a connection between payment of kofir and payment of damim.
Right.
In order to make that connection, we had to compare two cases. We had to compare b'kavanah and shelo b'kavanah.
Right.
So we said, we find kofir. Since we find kofir in b'kavanah, therefore we will find damim by shelo b'kavanah.
Okay.
There's a kesher between kofir and kavanah, going from this case of shor of kavanah to the case of shelo b'kavanah of shor.
Okay.
There's a kesher between kofir payment and damim payment, and like that we were able to say that there won't be a payment of damim in the case of Eish. Why? Because that case of the kavanah of Eish, there's no kofir. There's no kofir. There can't be damim then, because they go together.
They go together.
They go together.
Okay.
In order to have a payment of damim, you have to show me a case where you're going to pay kofir.
Okay.
Not going to be the same case, of course, because you don't pay kofir and damim. But we looked at we looked at two different cases in short.
Right.
But that's the connection that we found.
Okay.
So that we understand.
Yeah.
Over here, though, I thought that what the Gemora is saying is that we're saying that you could have a payment of damim afal gav, that you don't have a payment of kofir.
Because this was our kavanah. If it was a kavanah, you would have kofir.
Right. So it's not the point that of course we know that in the case of shelo b'kavanah there's no payment of kofir, but we're showing that the fact that there's no kofir, that doesn't mean that there won't be a payment of damim. There's no payment of kofir, but that's not related to the payment of damim.
I think it's this is a way to say it is in the first case we're saying, like you said, there's a connection between kofir and damim. When you have kofir, don't have damim. When you don't have kofir, you have damim.
Right.
That's the first cut.
Yeah.
Right.
The second cut is it doesn't matter whether we're not concerned with the connection between kofir and damim. What we're concerned is with the fact that if you have an unintentional damage, in the case of shor, you have to pay damages. Therefore, if you have an unintentional damage in the case of fire, you have to pay damages.
But why would it mention then the din of kofir at all?
I'm saying even if you
wouldn't
have,
mention kofir.
even if you don't have kofir in the intentional case, it doesn't matter. That's what it's saying. Even in a case where you have kofir in the intentional, you still could have a payment of damim in the unintentional, because you see, in unintentional both pay damim.
Well, we're starting off with the case of short. Short, we say, in the case of Shelo B'Kavanah, we're taking that case. Even though there's no payment of kofir in that case, because there is a payment of kofir in the case of B'Kavanah.
Yeah.
So we have to focus on the case of Shelo B'Kavanah in short.
Right.
Even though there's no kofir payment, nevertheless, Mishalim Damim. We see there's going to be a payment of Damim. Where? In that case of Shelo B'Kavanah. Okay? So therefore, Gabi Isha Nami. So too, we could say by Eish. Eish, in other words, is comparable to shore. The Odilma, the second side of the coin, is saying that Eish is, yes, comparable to shore. We showed by shore that even though there's no payment of kofir, there will be a payment of damim. So now we're going to say the same thing in the case of Eish. Eish also, Afugav de B'Kavanah lo mishalim kofir. Even though that in the case of B'Kavanah, you do not pay kofir, but that is not an impediment to making you chayiv for damim in the case of Shelo B'Kavanah. Not like we said above. We said above, if you don't pay kofir in the case of B'Kavanah, you will not pay damim in the case of Shelo B'Kavanah.
That's the first.
That's the first case.
Right.
Now we're saying no, that even though you do not pay kofir for Eish in the case of Kavanah, you nevertheless will, yes, pay damim in the case of Shelo B'Kavanah. Well, how can you say that? But it's not so in the case of Shor. Shor, you see, like we said in the first Sad, that it seemed to be that since you were paying kofir in the case of B'Kavanah, that accounts for the fact that you're also going to pay damim in the case of Shelo B'Kavanah. Now the Gemora in this second side is saying, no, don't look at it like that. Just look at the case of Shelo B'Kavanah by itself. In the case of Shelo B'Kavanah by itself, the case of Shor, what's the din? There's no payment of kofir. I know that. Okay, fine, good, we know that. But even though there's no payment of kofir in that case, is it possible there could be a payment of damim in that case? Sure there is possibility they're going to pay damim. You are going to pay damim. That in fact is the din. Oh, what do we see from that? We see that
It's possible that if you don't have kofir, you have damim.
Yeah. So therefore, let's look at the case of Eish. Even though you don't have a payment of kofir in the case of Kavanah, which you would have thought to say that's where you'll have your payment of kofir for a wrongful death case. So therefore, even though you don't have that payment of kofir over there in that case, don't think that will be preventing you from paying damim in the case of Shelo B'Kavanah. Don't think that.
Right.
You could pay damim in that case, even though you don't have a payment of kofir in the case of Kavanah. How do we know to say that they're not related? Because we're looking at the case of Shor differently than we did in the first side.
That's a song. That's a song.
It's what we
That low covenant starts out with low covenant.
right.
And I already know that if it was covenant, it would be kofir.
Obviously, you're not going to pay kofir in the case of Shelo B'Kavanah,
Right,
or maybe it's
right.
not so obvious.
Almost,
Because what happened at the end of the day? What happened to this Evid? What happened to this Ben Chorin? He died as a result of the shore. Okay, the shore was scratching his back on the wall, right? He wasn't intending to kill anybody, but Lamaisa, he scratched his back on the wall very strongly, and the wall, I guess, was not 100%. And what happened?
Oh,
It fell on the Ben Chorin. So we're talking about a case of wrongful death.
right.
Is there a possibility that there be a kofir payment in the case of wrongful death? Why not? Why not? So we see that in the case of Shalom Kavanah,
Right.
that even though
That's so
there's
simple.
no payment of kofar,
Right.
but there will be payment of damim.
Dummy.
Oh, so now we found an instance of shore where they don't go together. Even though you don't pay kofar, you will pay damim.
Right.
So now we say, oh, if that's so, if you found that to be so in the case of shore, so maybe we could also now we can compare Aish and say Aish is comparable to the case of shore. How so? We'll say that even though there's no payment of kofar in the case of Aish, even where the Aish is murder, even in that case, no kofar. Oh, but that doesn't stop us from saying that there's a payment of damim. In which case, shalom kavanah.
Can you also say it this way?
Clear.
In the first instance, it's saying that there's a connection. In the first instance, I'm doing this for your benefit.
Thank you.
In the first
There's
instance,
not any mood. There's no
in the first instance, they're saying there's a connection between kofar and damim.
Right,
You have kofar,
right.
or you have damim instead of kofar. That's the first view. In the second view, they're saying it's not a matter of having kofar or having damim as an alternative. It's simply a matter of looking at the situation where you have unintentional and saying unintentional you have damim.
Okay.
So if you view it the first way, you're going to say, you're going to come to one conclusion. If you do it the second way, you're going to come to a different conclusion. Is that valid?
What according you have to, the second side of the coin is saying that we're finding a similarity between Aish and shore. In other words, what you're saying really is that's the conclusion. That's the conclusion that we want to come out with. That just like there's a payment of damim in the case of shalom kavanah of shore, so too there's also a payment of damim in the case of shalom kavanah by Aish. That's right. That's what we want to come out with. That's the bottom line. But how are we looking at how are we looking at Aish in comparison to shore, such that we should get to that conclusion? We need a mahalach. We need some type of a idea to get us to that conclusion, because we put forth an idea in the first case which showed that they're not similar to one another, and that'll explain why in shore there is payment of damim, and by Aish there won't be payment of damim. So now it's not enough for us simply to say, well, if you just want to look though at shalom kavanah, this one has damim, and that one also should have damim. Why? Why should that be? The way we looked at it
It's the second case.
Because
second case is the problem.
in this view, you're saying that there's no connection between damim and kofar. That's why it says that in the case of kavanah for Aish, you don't have kofar. It's saying, but it doesn't matter that you don't have kofar. We don't care about that, because in this view, we're saying there's no connection between kofar and damim. They're independent.
That's in the second case.
That's in the second case.
The second case is only a question of, something got injured and you're paying damim regardless, kofar, no kofar, you're going to pay damim. In the first case, the damim is only a substitute when you can't give kofar. If you have kofar,
Right.
you give the kofar. But if you can't give the kofar, which is the shalom kavanah, then the substitute is to give damim. But in terms of an Aish, Aish doesn't have bichlal that situation of kofar. There can never be a situation of kofar for Aish. So since there can never be a situation of kofar for Aish, there can never be a situation of damim for Aish. That's the shalom kavanah.
Why can't there be
That's
kofar
exactly
for
what I
Aish?
said.
What?
Why can't there be kofar for Aish?
Oh, Aish is no. Aish has to be have to kill somebody. The kavanah. The only time you can have
no kofar for
the only
Aish.
time there can be kofar
Yeah, as well.
is kavanah and it has to be with kavanah,
Yeah.
and it has to kill somebody. That's the only time
Let's
you can have
explain this. You're asking a question. When my shore kills somebody, the kavanah, is that called that I'm a murderer?
No.
My property killed this person. I didn't do it. What happens when a person does eish b'kavanah and kills a
He's
person?
directly doing it.
He's a murderer.
That's not eish. That's him, right? It's like taking a loaded gun and shooting it. That's not saying the gun did it. I'm using the gun to kill. Over here too, I'm using the eish. I lit the eish to kill. So that's not even eish at all. It's not even eish at all. That's called the person is a murderer. So what's the din in that case? If a person is a murderer,
Chayav Misa.
he's chayav misa. Is there any kofar payment in that case? No. Why? Why not?
Doesn't.
Because it's the most
Because
serious.
of
Kavanah d'Rabbanan.
Gimlei b'derabamine, right? He's judged with the more serious penalty, and the second one he's let go, right? Right. But shore is a totally different type of a mazik. It's my shore that did the hezek. So then there's no chiyuv misa at all. So there's no chiyuv misa. So what's the din? Well, we have a pasuk mafurish. We have a pasuk in the Torah that says that's where we know that there is in fact a payment of kofar. That's where we know that there is in fact a payment of kofar. When my shore kills a person, there's a payment of kofar. Right? And we said that what about when my boar kills a person? Is there a payment of kofar when my boar kills a person? Who's the killer when my boar kills a person?
The board.
Person digs a boar, and then somebody falls in it and dies.
Unless he pushes him down.
Okay. Oh, that's true. That's not boar. That's called murder. Exactly. Right? You used it, very good. You used the boar to do an act of murder.
Right.
You used the aish to do an act of murder. You used the pistol to do an act of murder. That's got nothing to do with my shore killing. When my property kills, there's no chiyuv misa. There's a possibility of payment of kofar. Now, if my boar, I dig a boar. I didn't dig the boar. Chas v'sholom, I shouldn't have dug a boar like that.
Just uncovered it.
We're just talking theoretically. When a Jew, I even wouldn't want to say on myself that I uncovered a boar, and somebody, chas v'sholom. Just theoretically, we're saying that if Jew number one digs a boar and Jew number two falls in, is that an act of murder? Not an act of murder. Why not?
It's not the
Negligence.
Jew is not doing it. It's the board.
In order for it to be an act of murder, it means that the person has to do the act himself with his own.
Hands, I guess.
He could use aish. He could use a pistol, but that's called he's using that to do it. But a boar, that's removed. That's removed. It's true. I dug the boar, and he fell into the boar and he died. But it's not called that I'm a murderer. So there is a possibility. You would think, according to that maybe just like if my shore kills somebody,
It's just like the boy.
so the Torah says there's a chiyuv kofar. So if my boar kills somebody, I would think there's a chiyuv to pay kofar. Is that true? Is that din correct? That there's a chiyuv kofar when my boar kills somebody? No. Where do we know that there is no payment of kofar in this case? We had this a few days ago.
Sure.
When we learned the
Shor
Gemora.
v'lo adam.
Shor below Adam.
Right.
Very
This
good.
is the man.
And Rashi says that pasuk, from that pasuk, the Torah is mamayit the din of kofar from bor. What do we see from there? That Rashi understood that without that drasha, there would be a chiv to pay kofar for bor. Why not? Analytically, it comes out the same thing as my shore. More or less.
Nice.
More or less. Maybe it's not exactly the same thing, but we would have thought that it would be, and therefore that's why we need a pasuk. That's why you need a pasuk to say that no, there's no chiyuv kofar in that case. Okay. That was just a little bit of chazorah, so we did some chazorah, and now we're back to this. So this is okay. So Lou's got the point, and also Phil said it very well. Also, that's the point. In other words, the first way of looking at it, you're saying that the din of shor is that there's a payment of kofar, and the damim will be in place where there's no kofar payment, which otherwise is you say would have been. But if that's so then when it comes to Eish, there's no payment of kofar. Eish is not in the parsha of kofar at all. So if you want to look at it like that, there's no basis for saying there would be a payment of damim in the case of shalom b'kavanah. Of Eish, right. And the second case is like Lou explained, right? That we're trying to make a connection. In spite of the fact that there's no payment of kofar, there could be a payment of damim. Where do we see that? When it comes to shor, we have to disregard what it says in the case of kavanah and say we're just looking at the case of shalom kavanah. There's no payment of kofar over there. Is it possible that there could be a payment of kofar? Yeah.
What's kavanah?
Yes. No. Even shalom kavanah. The Gemora is talking about shalom kavanah.
He's talking about the rubbing against the wall and it falls on the person.
Yeah.
Without kavanah.
Yeah.
I could have said that was.
I mean, in our brain, could we think? Is it logical to say, if we didn't know anything about what it said in the Torah, could it be that there should be a kofar payment to atone for that? Yeah, I would say so. So that's what the Gemara is saying over here. Even though we might have thought to say there's a payment of kofar in that case of shlo b'kavanah of the shor, there isn't a kofar payment. So that case is a case which is not in the parsha of kofar. That case, it's not a bar kofar at all. It's not a kofar case. Oh, but that doesn't mean that it can't be a damim case. In fact, there is a payment of damim in that case. There's a payment of damim. Oh, so we see that damim is not, using Phil's words, it's not a bimkom payment when there's no kofar, because here there's no payment of kofar at all. We're just looking at the case of shalom b'kavanah. There's no payment of kofar over there. It's not a kofar case. Okay, but that doesn't mean that it won't be a damim case, because there's a separation between them. There's a separation between them. There's not a connection. Oh, if we see that by shor, so let's say we can also say the same thing by Eish. Gabi Eish Nami, says the Gemara. Also, that is true in the case of Eish. That what? That when we look at how do we see that? That I think we could. We're saying, why didn't the Gemara talk about the case of shalom b'kavanah? But I think maybe the Gemara means to say even a bigger chiddush. Even in the case of b'kavanah, there's no payment of kofar. It's not even there's no case of kofar at all. There's no case of kofar. There's no case of kofar ba'esh. There's no not b'kavanah, shalom b'kavanah. Even b'kavanah, there's no payment of kofar. Not only when it was shalom b'kavanah, there won't be a payment like that, but there won't be a payment. there never will be a payment of kofir. Nevertheless, does that mean that there won't be a payment of dummy? We'll say, just like we said in the case of short, no, there will be a payment of dummy. Because there is a separation between these two halachas. Separation. Even though there's no, that's what the second side of the coin is saying. Even though there's no payment of kofir, there could nevertheless be a payment of dummy. Where do we see that by short? In the case of shelo b'kavanah. Says the Gemora, and so too in the case of H. Even though there's no payment of kofir, where? Even in the case of b'kavanah, there's no payment of kofir. So. Nevertheless, there will be a payment of dumim. There will be a payment of dumim even in the case of shelo b'kavanah. Even in that case, there will be a payment of dumim. Right, because in the case of the kavanah, there won't think the payment of dumim either because he's high misa.
Right.
Okay, so these are the two. Good. Now we have some Rashis over here.
Now let's muddy the water back up.
What?
Now let's muddy the water back up. Now that we got it clear. Let's read Rashi.
Now that we have it clear, let's see how Rashi learned.
See how
That's
Rashi.
the way you're
You
supposed
know
to do
what we
it.
need to now, Rashi.
You can do
You're supposed to work on the words of the Gemara and come up with what you think the pshat is, and then take a look at Rashi. See how Rashi explains
See how
the
long
Gemara.
we were.
See how close you got. See how far away you got. See, when you have in your mind an idea about what you think it's saying, so then Rashi reads you're interested to read Rashi. Okay. So which Rashi do we have over here? How about El Rava Gufe? That's the Rava himself was not asking a question on Rava. He was simply asking what he held.
Where is it?
This is the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth line.
The wide lines.
Fifth of the wide lines in
In the
Rashi.
bottom.
Got it.
Who wants to read?
I can read it
Luke?
again.
You want to read again? Okay.
Ha, this, de osiv, le'ayel, le'el is above,
Right.
uh,
Ayel is a ram.
right, but I'm not sure what the osiv is.
Isha. His H.
No. Otiv.
Oh, Osiv. Osiv is from the word tiyufta.
You make a question or
Yeah.
an answer?
Yeah.
Oh, this question from above, Asu, it came,
Isha.
Isho, his fire, Shelo b'kavanah, without intention, Lav, defashita,
Lav de pshita le.
the bashita, Lav, it's not obvious. It's not simple
Lay to him.
to him. Delo mishalem, that he does not pay.
Right.
Ube tiufta, vise,
Right.
la, I don't know what that is.
Ube tiyufta, and as a tiyufta, Maisila, he's bringing this statement against him.
What's a tiufta?
Tiyufta is a refutation.
Ah,
When we originally read the words of Rava, Amalei Rava, Ihachi, we thought that Rava was attempting to refute what Rava said.
oh, right. Okay.
So now Rashi is saying that Hada Osif Le'el Isha Shelo B'Kavanah. This that he questioned on him above from the case of Eish Shelo B'Kavanah, not Lav de Pshitale, not that it was obvious to him, the Loi Mishalem, that you don't pay in such a case like that, if Eish Shelo B'Kavanah, that you do not pay Damim. Ubetiyufta Maisila, and he was bringing this as a challenge to Rava.
Ella, rather, Bilashon Boye Maisei La.
Right.
With a language of is it necessary?
Question.
Right.
Why is a question?
Boye is a question?
Yeah.
Okay. The language of a question he brought it. Vahachi, and here, Ka'amar, it's as to say, lay to him, Rava, le Rabba, Rava is saying to Rabba, Ihachi, if so, Dishor, Shalo B'Kavanah, in the case of a shore, where it's not intentional,
Right.
She'ain kofir, that there is not kofir.
Right.
Yesh damim, there is damim.
Right.
Esho, his fire.
Right.
Shalo b'kavana, without intention.
Right.
My, what is the case there?
What is the din? What is the din?
So it's not a challenge. It's just a question. He's asking Rabba, well, what is this? What is the implication from what you said here to what we would say here?
Right. Right. If you say like this in the case of shore, that there will be a payment of damim shelo b'kavanah when there's no kofir, what is your view in the case of eish shelo b'kavanah? Will there be a payment of damim over there or not? What do you hold? Right. Originally, Rabba, we thought, was asking a kasha on Rabba. We were saying, according to what you hold, Rabba, in the case of shore, that there's a payment of damim, it should come out that there is a payment of damim also in the case of eish. And I have a tonight source that says that there is no payment of eish. That's the way we originally thought Rabba was saying, and therefore we were looking, where does Rabba know that there is no payment in that case? And we couldn't find any. We couldn't find any tonight source that held that. So now we're changing the whole comment that Rabba is saying. He's not asking because he has a card up his sleeve. He's asking a question of Rabba. What do you hold in the case of eish, in view of the fact that you hold that there is a payment of damim in the case of shore? Okay, that's what Rashi's saying over here.
Later?
Yeah, about
eish de b'kavana lo mishalem. But in the case of unintentional fire, he does not pay kofir. He doesn't pay kofir, says Rashi.
That's what our text of Rashi reads over here. But you take a look at the Bach, Hagos Bach, on the upper left-hand side. Hagos Bach, he says...
That's the bet.
Yeah, host base.
So Dalid Hay.
Dibra Maskil. He's telling you, take a look at this Dibra Maskil over here.
Aval to Dibra Maskil.
V'chulei,
etc.
etc.
Lo mishalem, he does not pay damim chada. He does not pay damim. What's chada here?
That's the next word of Rashi. We don't know what that's referring to. But the main point is that the Bach is making a huge difference in what Rashi's saying.
He's saying he doesn't pay damim.
There's also a hair on this. There's a, it says in a Hagota Tzionim, Ozvada over here, that the Tzrich Beibur al Zeh.
Zu Tzorech Bir.
Beibur. It's not the Shuk of Tikkun. It may be okay with what it says here.
Well, let's see, what do we have in our case? Aval Eish, the Bekavana, Lo Mishalem, Kofir. That sounds like Rashi's quoting our Gemora in the first side of the coin. It said that, but Eish is different than the case of shore, that because in the case of kavanah, he does not pay what? He doesn't pay kofir.
Right.
Because with kavanah, there's a possibility to pay, you'd think to pay kofir. So the bach over here is difficult. Okay. Fine.
Chada. What's chada?
One.
One.
For one thing,
De'ain kofir. There is not kofir. There's no kofir. The aish with fire. But od, and also, dekam lay, it establishes to it, bidaracha, bidaraba, according to Rava, mine.
Yeah.
Establishes according to Rava that there's no kofir in the case of aish.
What do you mean by overruled?
Rashi's saying two things over here.
Yeah, what I understand is two things on. I didn't say Ma'od.
With regard to this din, the Aish, in the case of Kavanah, does not pay kofir. Let's go with the gears that we have and put the Bach on the side for a moment. So Rashi is saying two things. First he says the first thing, and he calls it Chada. The first thing that I have to say is the following. Ein kofir be'esh. There is no payment of kofir in the case of Aish.
I see.
It doesn't. They're not a. They don't go together. They don't go together. They're not. They don't go together. And then Rashi says, "Va'od," and furthermore, even if you would say that they would possibly go together, there's a reason why they're not going to go together in this case.
Wait, what's not going to go together?
Kofir and in the case of Eish b'kavanah. There's another reason why there cannot be a payment of kofir in the case of Eish b'kavanah. The first thing Rashi said is that intrinsically you can't say that there's a payment of kofir when it comes to Eish.
Doesn't say it.
It's as though Rashi said, where do we find kofir payment in the Torah? By the parsha of Shor. You want to say that it applies to the case of Aish? Says Rashi, no, it doesn't apply to the case of Aish. No payment of kofir by Aish. No payment of kofir by Aish. It's got nothing to do with the principle of Kimblei b'derabba minei. There's just no payment of kofir in the case of Aish. That's the first thing Rashi's saying. Chada, first of all, says Rashi, ein kofir b'Aish. There's no kofir by Aish. Then Rashi says, va'od, and furthermore, meaning I have a second reason that there's not going to be a payment of kofir, because Kimblei b'derabba minei. Because according to the principle, we have a principle when it comes to omshin. When a person has two omshin leveled on him, he doesn't get both of them. He gets the more severe one, and the other one he's exempt from. So in this case, the case of Eish b'kavanah is a chiyuv misa.
What does that have to do with Rabbah? Why does it say we established to Rabbah from it? Oh, is that not Rabbah? What was this word? Bidarabba.
That's a challenge. But the Rabbah means the greater one, the greater penalty.
Got it. That's why.
Kimlei, we're going to establish to him the Rabbah meaning, the greater of the two penalties.
What two penalties are here?
Got it.
What two penalties are we talking about?
Pisa
Yeah.
and kofir.
Maybe it was dummy.
We're not talking about. We're talking about the first part.
That's what it's talking about.
The more said about the kavanah, lo b'shalom kofir.
The beginning of my two
Eish
things.
does not pay kofir. Eish b'kavanah does not pay kofir.
Maybe that
It's
was.
Rashi two reasons.
Whatever they're talking about.
One reason is Eish b'kofir.
You kind of
There's no kofir implied by Eish. Second thing is that we have a principle when it comes to omshin. We have a principle by omshin. You're judged with the greater of the two penalties. You're judged with the greater of the two penalties. So even if it would be that there is such a thing as kofir when it comes to Eish. But in this case, there won't be any. Why? Because the person is Chayav Visa. So if he's Chayav Visa, he'll be Pater on the Kofir. So we have two, according to Rashi, two independent reasons why, in case of Eish, the Kavanah, Lo Mishalim Kofir.
So the first one